What if the person who suddenly cut everyone off was never trying to hurt anyone? What if they were trying to survive? But here's the strange part. Sometimes the people who disappear from everyone's lives were once the ones who cared the most. Imagine this. There's someone in your life. Maybe a friend, maybe a sibling, maybe even you. At first, they were everywhere. They answered every message. They showed up to every gathering. They listened to everyone's problems. They were the reliable one. But then something changed. Slowly, quietly, they started disappearing. First, they stopped replying quickly. Then they stopped going out. Then one day, they just cut everyone off. No explanation. No drama. Just silence. And everyone else starts asking the same question. What's wrong with them? But here's the disturbing part. Almost nobody asks what happened to them. Think about the last time someone cut people off. Most people assume one of three things. They're arrogant. They think they're better than everyone. They're just cold. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people who cut everyone off don't think they're better than others. They think something is wrong with themselves. And this is where the psychology begins. Picture a guy named Daniel. Daniel was the friend everyone called when life went wrong. Breakups, family problems, late-night panic attacks. Daniel always picked up the phone. He listened. He helped. He stayed. But here's the strange part. When Daniel needed someone, almost nobody noticed. And that slowly does something to a person. Not all at once, but over time. Like water slowly eroding stone. Most people think emotional burnout only happens at work. But here's the unsettling truth. It happens in relationships too. When someone constantly carries everyone else's emotions, their brain eventually learns something dangerous. It learns that connection equals exhaustion. And once the mind learns that, it starts protecting itself. But not in the way people expect. At first, the change is subtle. They start declining invitations. Not because they hate people, but because they're tired. Emotionally tired. But here's the strange part. People rarely notice emotional exhaustion. They only notice absence. And that absence creates tension. Friends start whispering. Why are they acting weird? Why are they ignoring everyone? And this is where the situation quietly gets worse. The more people question them, the more pressure they feel to explain themselves. But here's the disturbing part. They often don't even understand it themselves. They just know something feels wrong. Something feels heavy. Something feels draining. So they choose the simplest solution their brain can find. Distance. And sometimes, that distance becomes complete isolation. Take Sarah. For years she was the nice one. She never argued, never disappointed anyone, never said no, until one day, she started noticing something strange. People only seemed to love her when she was useful, and this realization hits people like lightning. Suddenly they see every interaction differently, every favor, every conversation, and that's when a dangerous thought appears. Maybe I should just disappear. But here's where the story flips. Cutting everyone off isn't always about rejecting people. Sometimes, it's about finally choosing yourself. For someone who spent years prioritizing everyone else, distance feels like freedom. But here's the strange part. Freedom can also feel terrifying. Because humans are wired for connection. So when someone isolates themselves, their mind enters a strange conflict. Part of them feels relief. Another part feels loneliness. And that contradiction is where the real struggle begins. Now imagine you're on the outside. Your friend disappears, stops texting, stops showing up. From your perspective, it feels personal, like rejection. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the time, it was never about you. It was about something happening inside their mind, something they didn't know how to explain. And this is where things get even deeper. Some people cut everyone off because of a quiet fear they rarely admit. The fear of being seen too clearly. Because the closer people get, the more they might notice the exhaustion, the sadness, the cracks in the mask. And for some people, distance feels safer than vulnerability. But here's the strange irony. The same people who cut everyone off often feel the most lonely. They scroll through their phone at night. They think about old friendships, old conversations, old versions of themselves. And sometimes they wonder, did I make a mistake? But pride, fear, and time make it harder to go back. So when someone cuts everyone off, the real question isn't, why are they so cold? The real question is, what pushed them to the point where silence felt safer than connection? And the answer is rarely simple. Sometimes it's burnout. Sometimes it's betrayal. Sometimes it's years of feeling invisible. But here's the most fascinating part of all. Sometimes the people who cut everyone off aren't trying to end relationships. They're trying to see who will come looking for them. Not out of curiosity, but out of genuine care. Because deep down, even the most isolated person still hopes someone will notice. Still hopes someone will ask, "Are you okay?" And if nobody asks, the silence only grows. So the next time someone disappears from your life, before assuming the worst, consider something else. Maybe they weren't running away from people. Maybe they were running away from a life that slowly taught them they had to carry everything alone. And once you realize that, a different question appears. One that almost nobody asks. What happens when someone who cut everyone off finally decides to come back? And more importantly, who will still going to be there? Before you leave, I want to ask you something. Have you ever cut everyone off? Not because you hated people, but because you were tired of carrying everything alone? Or maybe someone in your life disappeared and you never really understood why. If this video made you see things differently, write "I understand now" in the comments. I read every comment, and your stories might help someone else realize they're not alone. And if you're curious about the darker side of human behavior, subscribe, because the next video will explore why some people slowly distance themselves before ending relationships completely.